This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
It's showtime, folks. It's episode 55 on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I'm Johnny Montalbano. That's Hank Indictor. Hank, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Johnny. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I can't complain, Hank, as we start to wind down the month of May and head towards Memorial Day weekend and into June. The summer is right around the corner, and it's amazing how fast it comes every year. But I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to this episode for a while. It's going to be a very, very good one. We've got a lot to discuss, and we'll tell you all about it in just a second. But of course, folks, just your friendly reminder, plenty of ways for you all to get aboard as well. So first and foremost, you can follow us on our social media channel and Twitter at GameOnETB, Instagram GameOn_ETB. Our personal handles are right there and there. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network, where if you like today's episode, leave us a like. If you're new, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And of course, have your notifications set so our programming is going to be coming out. And I say that because we've got a lot coming up, a little behind the scenes that I've been told. It's a lot's in the works, so stay tuned for that. And you can also check out our website at etbpodcast.com for great, blogging content from Hank and from Jennifer Kate and so many more. And you can also catch us on your favorite podcast platform if you're on the go, or if you want to just hear the audio version on many of your favorite podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. You can check us out there. So, Hank, like I said, we've got a lot to get to over the course of the show. Almost a little bit of everything is in the works here. As we're going to get to the Stanley Cup playoffs, which have just been, the conference finals happening right now. A historic start to the conference finals. What do I mean by that? We'll tell you about that in just a little bit. We've got some NFL discussion too. Of course, on a little bit of a sad note, we will honor and remember Jim Brown, who passed away this past week. We've also got, it looks like Super Bowl 60 all set to go to San Francisco. So a very interesting rule, or an interesting, I should say, flexing of Thursday Night Football, which looks to be official. We're going to get to that. And if we also have some time down the road, we're going to get into some horse racing and some golf. So a lot to get to. But first and foremost, we've got to tip things off here with the NBA playoffs and the NBA in general. And we've got a lot to discuss with the NBA. So we thought, let's switch things up a little bit and also introduce the newest member of the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. He's going to be starting a show. You've probably heard the show before. We've had him on in the past. But now it is coming to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, the host of the 3ND. Let's welcome back to Game On, Paul Lombardi. Paul, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you doing?
We're doing great. First and foremost, we want to congratulate you. You can see right there, we've had him on before, host of the 3ND, which is a fantastic show, and I'm very excited to have it here. It is going to start up next Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern, and we will get to that and talk about that show in just a few minutes. But Paul, NBA playoffs, they have been unpredictable. This is so different. And, we were talking about this before we came on the air. This year has different than years past. Usually, the top seeds are the ones that get very, very far, the best teams because they have the best talent. But still here as of now in the conference finals, you've got a 7th seed out west and an 8th seed out east. I guess let's start out west now. Just to let everybody know, the Lakers and Nuggets series could be over with this airs, but nevertheless, when you look at this Western Conference series here first, is this really a case more of the Lakers just falling apart, or the Nuggets, are they really that good?
Honestly, I think it's a mixture of both. I think that the Nuggets have always been very close, and the Jamal Murray injury has kind of sidelined them for the past couple of seasons. They finally got him back. Michael Porter Jr. was finally able to put in a full healthy season. And then Nikola Jokic obviously averaging a triple-double, just casually dropping 10 assists as a 7-footer like no one else can. I mean, they're built for this kind of situation, and I'm just glad that they honestly are pushing far. Obviously, over the last few years they've gotten out early in the playoffs and haven't really advanced too far. But I think that they're all in, and I think it's a mixture of both too, because I think that the Lakers are somewhat choking it, but in a way, like you saw their team before the trade deadline. They definitely improved a little bit, bringing in D'Angelo Russell, bringing in Jared Vanderbilt, and a few pieces. But the entire team it's not an NBA championship team, and LeBron. The offense doesn't run through LeBron anymore. I think that's been pretty evident in these first 3 games. The offense kind of runs through Anthony Davis and Austin Reeves is what it mainly looks like. LeBron is definitely in the back end of his illustrious career, and I think it's the first time that we're kind of seeing him hit a decline. And Anthony Davis too with his health. I think the Nuggets are just a better team in my opinion, and I think that they're finally proving it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Jokic is really having his moment to step up and shine for the first time, especially now that he's got a loaded team around him. And yeah, I think, Paul, you pretty much said it best. LeBron, even though you still see those moments where he'll put up vintage playoff LeBron performances, this definitely is a LeBron that we're seeing on the decline. And I think if you kind of have to rely on other guys as the stars for the Lakers, that's kind of a sign that they're on the decline. But you also have to give them credit where credit is due for being able to get further than a lot of people thought before the playoffs happened. However, with that being said, I think this very well might be Jokic's time to shine. And look, could he go on and win that title and that Denver has never seen before in the NBA? I don't know, but they are on the verge of making history because the Denver Nuggets have never reached an NBA Finals before. In fact, do you guys even know the last time the Nuggets made it to a conference finals?
Carmelo Anthony.
Bingo.
Back in 2008, I want to say.
09.
2009. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep,
that was when they got boat raced by the Lakers.
Yep, and that was like Carmelo's best moments too. That was the prime of his career right before he came over to the Knicks. Obviously, Carmelo announced his retirement today too, so it's good to mix him into the talk a little bit, especially with how much of a Nuggets legend he is. But I completely agree. I think that in some ways it was successful for the Lakers, though. Being a play-in team, they're the first play-in team. Them and the Miami Heat are the first playing teams to actually win a playoff series ever since they brought the rule in. There hasn't been a team to win a playoff series, and now obviously you guys. I mean, the Lakers probably aren't going to make the finals, but you got the Miami Heat who are on the verge of making it. I think that that's definitely true. It can be argued both ways for sure.
Yeah, when I look at the Lakers and Nuggets series, I said on the show last week that as much as we talk about LeBron and Jokic, and there's no doubt about it, to me, the secondary players, and what I mean by that is the Lakers' Anthony Davis was probably the most inconsistent star that there is in the league this year, and we've seen that again in this postseason. He was going to be very important. And also on the Nuggets side, who's going to be that other person? Because Jamal Murray right now looks like he's like the Jamal Murray of the bubble series back in 2020. Which one of those – where are you going to get your secondary scoring from? And we've definitely seen the Nuggets are getting from that. I mean, we saw Jokic not really even have his best game in Game 3, his best moments in Game 3, and yet they still found a way to win that game pretty decisively. So as much as we talk about the stars getting you this far along, your secondary players and your bench players and really your depth is just as important.
Oh, absolutely. It's the depth that's 100% has helped the Nuggets come along because you've seen in seasons past, Jamal Murray's injuries and Michael Porter Jr.'s injuries, and a lot of series, Jokic would be the only one that shows up. And now they have a much better all-around team. Bruce Brown is a good glue guy. You got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, too, who's playing against his old team. And Aaron Gordon, too, is kind of like a glossed-over solid player as well. They're getting good production out of all of them. And I think that that's like the biggest takeaway that has shown like their dominance so far is that Jokic has been great, but he doesn't have to be 90% of the team. You know, he's got some good players around him that are starting to develop into like solid NBA players.
Yeah, absolutely. Hank, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I think that's definitely a really good point. And yeah, Caldwell Pope's been another guy that's kind of been under the radar. Bruce Brown, I'm glad you brought that guy up. I mean, he has been averaging in the playoffs. Let me see here. Well, this year he has been averaging like 11.5 points and 3.4 assists. Pretty solid numbers right there. Definitely a solid role player for the Nuggets, so to speak. And Michael Porter Jr., another solid player on that squad. And I think definitely when it comes down to it, I think you can't really look at the Lakers as chokers, so to speak. However, if you want to talk about a choking team, I would say look at the team that's losing 3-0 on the other side in the Eastern Conference Finals. But Johnny, I'm sure we will discuss that team very, very soon. And boy, do I have a lot of words to say about the coach of the Celtics, Joe Mazzulla, because I don't know if you guys saw his press conference, but if you're a Celtics fan and you watch that, I would be livid if I were you.
Yeah, it's crazy because, you know, he definitely wasn't ready to become a head coach right away. I think he was Udoka's top guy, and he kind of moved up the ranks really quickly. I mean, he's a young dude. Like the report just came out today to put everything in perspective. When Jimmy Butler was at Marquette, they defeated West Virginia in the playoffs, and Joe Mazzulla was the starter for West Virginia at that time. So it really goes to show like how young he is. And obviously, you know, he's playing up against Jimmy Butler, a guy who like he played against, is now coaching against. And he didn't have any NBA experience either, Mazzulla. So he kind of became a coach right after college. It's an interesting situation for sure.
That said, I also think as dominant or as horrible as the Celtics have played in this series, you also have to give credit to the Miami Heat where credit is due. And look, I stayed with family friends while I was in Boston over the past, I want to say, week and a half. And they were telling me that they were not looking forward to playing the Miami Heat. And a good reason for that would have to be the only Jimmy Buckets. And oh my gosh, like, look at a lot of the point production that he's been getting. I would say he definitely may very well be the next number that gets retired by the Miami Heat when it's all said and done. I mean, he's carrying them just like he's done in years past too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so switching over to that Heat Celtics series, and we're talking with Paul Lombardi, host of the 3 which is going to start up on Monday, May 29th here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Paul, this Heat Celtics series, I got to tell you, you know, when Hank and I were previewing it last week on the show, the key for me was, would they be able to stop Jason Tatum? And if they were able to do that, then on the Celtics, you could deal with. See, it wasn't like it was a 1-star or a no-star situation like you had with, you know, the Knicks or the Bucks with, you know, Giannis. The Knicks didn't really have a star, as painful as me as a Knicks fan to say that. That's just the reality of it. But
sure.
When you look at the Celtics, I mean, if Tatum doesn't have a good game, you've got Smart, you've got Brown. But what they've been able to do to shut out Jason Tatum has been absolutely amazing. And you know what? Then also good, you have to give a ton of credit to Eric Spoelstra. You know, we're talking about coaching, and Eric Spoelstra, what he's been able to do down there in Miami. To me, Paul, I said it on the show, and I've been saying this constantly. Miami's an 8 seed, in number only. This team is a real dangerous team, and I was fearful to play them as a Knicks fan, and they're showing it again here. I mean, again, like I said in the Lakers Nuggets series, is this a combination of, is this more Miami or more on Boston side, or is this just a combination of both?
And that's exactly it. You know, this is a team that was in the NBA Finals just 3 years ago, was the 1 seed in the East last season during the playoffs, and now kind of came in as a 7 and lost their first playing game, and they were on the brink of not even making it at all. They kind of underperformed in a lot of ways this season. Kyle Lowry was hurt for a while. Jimmy Butler was hurt for a bit. So they had an up and down, not a very impressive record, but you knew, they're fully healthy, and that team is scary for sure. And a lot of it goes down to Spoelstra, without a doubt, because you look at some of the guys that he turns into players. You got Gabe Vincent, who was a nobody from UC Santa Barbara. You got Max Strus, who was a very good college player. He played in the Big East, so I used to watch him a lot. DePaul, great 3-point shooter, but he's turning into a great all-around player too. Duncan Robinson was playing D3 and then ended up switching to Michigan, and they turned him into a player, even though he hasn't really done a whole lot since then. It's just their coaching is fantastic. Their leadership is fantastic too. Jimmy Butler is arguably the best leader in the NBA, I think. Like, as far as star players go, he's in any conversation. I mean, like, the guy's a stud. Everybody on the team rides with him. He rides with them. Adebayo too, and even without Tyler Hero too, they've been able to do all of this, which is just when you watched how they played against the Knicks, it honestly does not surprise me how they're handling the Celtics.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, to piggyback on what you said, Johnny, do you remember what I said to you before the series, what the big difference could be between the Celtics and the Heat and winning and losing? I said head coaching could be the difference, and I think we've really seen over the years how great of a coach Eric Spoelstra is, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so let's just say that it's trending towards that it's going to be a Nugget Heat final, which, of course, if you listened to me last week, I said it was going to be the total opposite. So, of course, but let's say it's going to be a Nugget Heat final, because it looks like it's going to be the case. What do you think about that as a possible finals matchup?
I think it's fantastic. I honestly think it's awesome. I think that's a series that can go either way too. That's like that. We have a potential of seeing a Game 7 in the NBA Finals, which is nothing better than that. That's exactly what I wanted. Like in the first round, I wanted to see the Nuggets, and I want to see Nuggets versus Knicks originally. But then when the Knicks were out, obviously, I swapped in the Heat because I can't root for the Celtics. But Nuggets versus Heat Finals. I mean, that's amazing, and it also shows the disparity that's in the NBA nowadays too, which I love. We're past the era of every single year it's Cavs versus Warriors, or the Warriors are always in it, or the Lakers are always in it, or the Spurs are always in it. Like, we're past that to the point where there's a lot of good teams, and the playoffs are a real dogfight to make it to the end. And you have a kind of a different finals every single year. I mean, I think it's great. I'm so excited. I honestly, no matter who wins that series, I'd be content with seeing either of them win.
Honestly, just the fact that the Celtics are going to probably get knocked out is what makes me happy. I mean, look,
that's the sweet part about it.
Yeah, you guys know what I like to say. Friends don't let friends root for the Celtics. Well, friends also don't let friends root for either the Flyers or the Eagles, but that's a story for another day. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. I remember getting absolutely bored watching the NBA back when we were in college fall, because I'm like, these games are so meaningless. It's going to be Cavaliers versus Warriors, but yet now you have teams doing well in the regular season. Now you're starting to see that the regular season in the NBA really doesn't mean that much, and it's starting to remind me, and I feel like I'm piggybacking off of Johnny when I say this, like the NHL playoffs in that sense. But
yeah,
in any event, really what it comes down to really is that it's the survival of the fittest. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing a series between Jokic and Butler. And Paul, I'm a big fan of like your pyramid system for the NBA. In fact, I don't mean to sound biased when I say that, but I tend to view yours more favorably than a certain former ESPN employee who's like kind of a Celtics homer who has initials that I can't exactly repeat. But where do you think? I have a feeling you're going to upgrade either Butler or Jokic into your pyramid, regardless of how that series goes. No, and Where do you have those guys, by the way? I don't know if you've since upgraded that piece since last we spoke about that, which, by the way, that was like 2 or 3 years ago when you had me on that episode and I gave you like my top 10 all-time list. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we put together a top 10 list for a little bit of context for anyone out there. Back during COVID, when everybody had so much time on our hands, I made my top 50 NBA players of all time. Kind of put together a big blog post for it, and me and Hank always go back and forth about where each player is ranked. And that obviously was back in 2020, so that was 3 years ago. So I didn't even have Giannis on it. Giannis is definitely on it now. Steph is further up on it. KD is probably a little further up on it. Jimmy Butler's arguably in it. I think Nikola Jokic definitely should be in it. I mean, 2-time MVP at this point. And if he wins a championship, he probably leaps into like the top 40, in my opinion. And Giannis, after winning that championship too, and he's got the 2 MVPs, he's probably somewhere in like the 20s or 30s. I mean, everybody's got different criteria for the top 50, but I think that if Jokic, the guy who can jump the most by winning a title would probably be Jokic because of the 2 MVPs. Jimmy Butler, I think if Jimmy Butler wins the NBA Finals, he more is establishing a Hall of Fame career rather than like a top 50 career. Like he's still a little bit of a ways to go since he doesn't have an MVP, but he's an amazing player. And even if he doesn't win the championship, win an NBA Finals, he probably ends up making it to the NBA Hall of Fame anyway.
Yeah, I would agree. I think those are all really good points. And I know you and I, like, as basketball I think you're more of the basketball historian than I am, but like you and I both can go on for days. I mean, look, we already did during COVID. I think during COVID, you and I talked like nonstop about basketball. You were probably one of many people that I just randomly went on and on because I was so bored, stuck in my house when I wasn't like playing whatever video games I had. But yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And that's the real reason that I really like the potential of the Nuggets Heat series. Because I'm always a big fan of those legacy storylines, and to go off at the risk of going off on a little tangent, that's why I really was fascinated by the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, because it pretty much enhanced a lot of legacies. And again, I'm not saying that just to kiss your what, because you've got those Chiefs posters in the background. I'm like,
of course,
how I am with that stuff.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like even if it's not your team, though, if it's a player that's likable that you like, it's nice to see them succeed and start to see like these star players build up big resumes for the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
I 100% agree with that. I like Jokic and I like Jimmy Butler too. I would love to see either of them win a ring because I think that would be awesome. I think it would further more push them into the Hall of Fame as guarantees. It's exactly likable players you like to see build it up. Like there's a lot of likable players that I never want to see win too. So I'll leave those nameless for the time being.
I think the only negative, though, all this great talk about the potential of the finals, the only negative could be we may be waiting over a week before the finals even starts because it's not till June 1st, and they're so strict on that. Oh, by the way, just to piggyback off that, see, I'm a Knicks fan. I'll be rooting for the Nuggets every day and twice on Sunday over the Miami Heat. I've always said the Miami Heat are one of the biggest rivals for the Knicks, and this goes back years. That's why when people are telling me about the Brooklyn Nets, the Nets are going to be the Knicks' biggest rival. That's silly. It's Miami, it's Boston, so that's what I would go with that. So the finals, though, still possibly a little over a week away. But Paul, one of the things we've seen as a result of the NBA playoffs, this whole playoffs in general, have been all the coaching firings. We've had 3 coming off of eliminations. Mike Budenholzer on the Bucks, Monty Williams on the Suns, and Doc Rivers of the 76ers. Now we heard a report from Woj on Monday about that the Bucks have been narrowing their coaching searches down to like the likes of like Nick Nurse and others. But when you look at all 3 of these guys, I mean, what were your thoughts about when they got fired and where the Bucks, the Suns, and the 76ers go from here?
It's crazy. There was a bunch of firings. I did not see those coming. I did not think that one quick elimination that the Bucks would let Bud go, and Monty Williams was really building up that team with the Suns too. He's been there the entire time. They've kind of taken that next step. So it was interesting to see him go, and Nick Nurse too. Nurse and Budenholzer are both NBA champion head coaches over the past 5-6 years. So I thought those were all interesting ones. The one that I didn't like wasn't surprised about is the Doc Rivers one, because the 76ers underperformed again, and this is becoming like a routine for Doc Rivers too. If you ignore the 2008 finals with the big three in the Celtics, he's done this a lot. He has good teams, and he can get them to the second round of the playoffs, sometimes even the conference finals, but not anything further past that. So I think it's going to be interesting. The one that I'm most interested at, I think Budenholzer is going to get another job. I don't know if it's going to be this year. Monty Williams, to be honest with you, I wouldn't even be surprised if he kind of like leaves coaching for a few years, because he's still owed $21 million from the Suns. He had all those issues like with his family and stuff like that when he lost his wife and stuff. So I think he wants to stay close to his family and kind of like do the family thing for the time being, and he's got plenty of money. So I could totally see him stepping away. And Nick Nurse, I 100% can see getting another job. Like the Bucks might end up hiring him. I think it might take Doc Rivers a little while to get another job. I don't see anybody hiring him like right off the bat. Like I'm not too sure, but I'd be surprised if he gets a job this off season or next off season. He might have to be an assistant.
Yeah, I think Doc is going back into coaching. I think Doc's going to go into broadcasting somewhere, whether that's color commentating or maybe ESPN or NBA TV. The Monty Williams one, I don't think actually was really that much of a surprise, because what did the Suns have? New ownership, and maybe they want their own guys. So I think his own guy. And there was also a report from Woj that said that Ishbia and Monty Williams didn't really get along, so that wasn't really that much of a surprise. Woj also reported on Monday that the Bucks are narrowing their coaching search possibly down to Nick Nurse, Kenny Atkinson, and Adrian Griffin as possibilities there in Milwaukee. And that should be fascinating too, because Giannis, the rumors swirling about Giannis going to the Knicks or possibly leaving Milwaukee down the road too as possibility. But just amazing that you've had 3 coaches fired off of a playoff run. But where those 3 go, going to be very, very interesting.
Absolutely. I think the Kenny Atkinson one is a very interesting one to look at too. I feel like he does get a job. I mean, he got a job last year when he took the Hornets job, and then like 5 days later he declined it and went back to being an assistant for Steve Kerr. So he was a very good coach. The only reason why he left was because Kyrie ran him out of Brooklyn when him and Katie went there. But I think Kenny Atkinson is a guy to watch out for. I like that a lot. Adrian Griffin's an up-and-coming guy. I mean, Nick Nurse, what you're going to get with Nick Nurse. I think Nick Nurse is a very solid head coach, and I could see the Bucks deciding to hire him. I wouldn't be shocked about that.
Wouldn't it be kind of funny, though, if Nick Nurse somehow found his way there, especially after he beat Milwaukee to get to the finals? And I can see a lot of like trading places scenarios with a lot of these coaches. Like, imagine the Bucks hire Monty Williams, or Phoenix ends up getting Coach Bud. So that would really be interesting. But Doc, I wouldn't be surprised necessarily if he gets another coaching job, because if you look at what a lot of the players say about him, they love having him as a head coach, and a lot of them say he's a good leader. But I think, as you guys alluded to, the problem is he's had a bad track record in Game 7s. And actually, if you really look at his tenure with the Celtics, you could argue that even there he underachieved, because I know he had that title in 2008, but they probably should have won at least one more title with that core. At the very least in 2009, 2010, they probably, maybe we talk a little bit differently about Doc Rivers should the Celtics hold on to that lead. But then there was also a few years later where they had a tough loss to Miami. But in any event, I think with the track record of losing in Game 7s, and I don't really know, but Coach Bud, Nick Nurse, those are guys who I can see getting hired, like probably tomorrow if possible. So yeah, it really just goes to show you that an NBA coach, probably past or present, most of them seem to have like 4 years as their expiration date. No.
Yeah, a lot of times. Yep, 3 or 4 years. And if there isn't, there are very few that make it, to close to 10 for sure.
Coach Pop is not only like the exception, he made it to like he's been the coach pretty much our entire life now of the Spurs.
Literally.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, I guess, if these are big names, but you're a big college guy too. Is there anybody in the college ranks possibly that you see coming up?
Well, the one interesting one that I saw was Ed Cooley. He was Providence's head coach, and obviously just took the Georgetown job. I saw his name linked. I thought that would be insane if like he, all the hoopla and stuff, him taking the Georgetown job and leaving Providence and stuff, he were to go to the NBA. But I think somebody like had some interest in him. As far as the others, I think Mike Woodson was had like some interest in him, but he's at his alma mater right now, and he's doing great. He's doing a great job recruiting. Like I don't think he wants to. I think he's going to end his career at the college level. But Ed Cooley was an interesting one. I thought was kind of cool, kind of interesting situation. He could be an NBA coach one day. I would not be surprised.
Yeah, because you never know, there'll be another opening or not. We're talking with Paul Lombardi, host of the 3&D here on Game On. Paul, you had brought his name up earlier on in our conversation, but Carmelo Anthony announced his retirement on Monday. Great career. I mean, I remember him from his time with the Knicks. That intro when he got traded to the Knicks, still one of the best intros in NBA history. Yes, I will go to that extreme and say that.
I'm coming home.
Yes, the coming home to run this, from the transition from I'm coming home to run this town was absolutely incredible. But Carmelo, I mean, what a career, right? I mean, there's not enough great things you could say about him. I mean, it's a bummer he couldn't win a championship, but I mean, not enough great things could be said about him too.
Absolutely, and he was a great Knick too. As a diehard Knicks fan, as well. He, we grew up. He was like the star of like my lifetime. I grew up when I was a little kid. I was a big Stephon Marbury fan. So he was like my guy when I was like a little kid. And then Carmelo, he made the Knicks relevant again. We were 15 years or so of really not doing much. Probably was able to bring them back to the playoffs, won a playoff series. The only thing that stunk was the Pacers were a much better team with Paul George and Roy Hibbert and all those guys. And then you had the Heat with their big three that you were never going to be able to beat. It was next to impossible. So you knew that they were never going to make it to an NBA Finals, no matter how good they were during the season. But they were just a fun team to watch. And obviously, won a scoring title with the Knicks. I think he made 6 All-Star teams with the Knicks. Just an all-around great player. And definitely was a lot of talk today about if his number should hang in the rafters at MSG. I think it's, MSG does not just give those out. The only Knick who's up there that hasn't won a championship is Patrick Ewing. And Patrick Ewing is by far a Hall of Famer, but Carmelo Anthony is also going to be a Hall of Famer, but technically Carmelo played longer for the Nuggets than the Knicks too. So, but besides all of that, tremendous career, one of the best scorers that we've ever seen in our lifetime. I loved him as a Knick too. A lot of Knicks fans hated him. A lot of Knicks fans, had mixed opinions on him. I loved him. He was our guy. And part of the reason why I loved him was he was a star player that wanted to be on the Knicks. And when being a Knicks fan, it was so frustrating watching, LeBron snub us and all those guys. And we actually had a star player that wanted to be a Knick and ended up signing 2 contracts with us. So I always liked Carmelo for that. And he was always very destined. If he's going to win, he wanted to win in New York too, which I thought was great.
And I mean, look, you mentioned him wanting to come to New York. look, love Melo or hate Melo, and Paul, I think I wasn't really quite as big of a Carmelo fan as you were, but you and I can both agree on this. And Johnny, I don't want to sound like I'm speaking for you, but I think you might probably agree with me too. But love him or hate him, he was really the only star. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I would say Amari Stoudemire too, but other than Stoudemire, he was the only star that truly wanted to come to New York and take on the challenge of making the Knicks relevant. And look, I have been on record saying that there have been moments where he hasn't always been the best team player and he's probably taken more shots. But with that having been said, I am also going to be fair and say the Knicks kind of screwed Carmelo in a set to a certain degree, although they also didn't really help themselves when they gave up practically a good chunk of the roster when they traded for him in February of 2011. But having said that, though, Carmelo Anthony, 62 points at MSG. I remember that very well. What was that, 2014, I want to say?
Yeah.
The game against the Charlotte Bobcats.
13.
Yeah, against the Bobcats. I think it was 13. Yeah. It was during the 12-13 season that he won the scoring title. They won a playoff series. That was like a dream that season.
Yeah, that was the 54-win team back then. Yeah. I mean, and think about it. I mean, now they're finally back to the good days. I mean, we keep talking about that year up until this past year with them.
I'm also going to play a little devil's advocate and say this. Like, yeah, I do agree that he's had moments where, like, you could maybe argue that he was responsible for the Linsanity being cut short with him getting D'Antoni fired and whatnot. But when you put him on a team with a lot of superstars, look at how much different he's been in the Olympics when compared to the NBA. And can I give you guys a fun fact? I believe Carmelo Anthony actually is the leading point scorer for the USA men's Olympic basketball team.
I'm pretty sure he played for 4 Olympic games, I think. 3
gold medals too.
Yeah. I would push back a little bit on the Linsanity thing, but
and not to mention he also what he did with Syracuse kind of should be mentioned too, since I believe that was the only championship team Syracuse ever had. And I'm kind of going to talk a little bit about a closer time that Syracuse came close to win a championship. And Johnny, you might have an idea what I'm talking about, but that'll be more for when we talk about a certain NFL legend's passing.
Absolutely. And we will get to that in just a little bit. We're talking with Paul Lombardi here on the show. Paul, one of the other great things that I follow your content a lot and person, and you've got the draft coming up here in about another month or so. And the big story, that came out this past week was the draft lottery. And, because we've got one of the biggest, hyped prospects, and I'll get to him in just a second here, in Wembanyama coming up. But the big thing with this draft lottery was the worst record this past season, and they ended up with the 5th pick. And who gets the number 1 overall pick? The San Antonio Spurs. So here are the Spurs, who had maybe the most consistent 20-year run that we've seen, not only in NBA history, but in almost all of sports. And now they end up with the number 1 overall pick to draft Victor Wembanyama. And we all know how they've done with international talent with Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili as of late. But I mean, what does this do for the Spurs if we assume they're going to draft Wembanyama number 1 overall?
It really is crazy that, they ended up with the 1st overall pick. I had a feeling it was going to happen because it's just the Spurs luck. And like, it was almost like a perfect storyline. You have Greg Popovich towards the end of his career, and you have this incredible French guy who everyone thinks is the next big thing. And of course, he goes towards his team. So I think it was literally best case scenario for Victor, and I think it was obviously best case scenario for the NBA too, because he's playing for a popular franchise. He's not going to play 4 or 5 years of his rookie deal for like the Orlando Magic or the Detroit Pistons, where they're not going to compete or anything like that. Not saying the Spurs are really ready to compete right now, even if you just add Wembanyama to that bunch, but he's an extreme difference maker, and he's got the potential, obviously, to be the biggest NBA talent since LeBron James was coming out of high school. That's what everybody expects. I think it's a lot of pressure to put on to put on the kid, but he does deserve that praise. With everything that he does, he's a stud. He just literally does everything. 7'4", he can handle the ball, he can shoot. Incredible rim protector. Great defender, quick hands. He's literally like the perfect player. But as for the Spurs, I think it's still going to take some time. I don't see them as adding Wembanyama as becoming a playoff team this year, especially in the West. They might get close to, maybe that 10 seed to possibly be a play-in, but I still think that they're a few pieces away. But if they have a couple bad seasons, get a couple more lottery picks, they might have another perennial winner very soon.
By the way, so here's an interesting little fun fact for you guys. You know who the last number one pick that the San Antonio Spurs had was?
Yep.
That would be none other than Tim Duncan, who I believe is in both of our top 10s on our pyramid, Paul, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely.
I don't remember where exactly he was on yours, but on mine, I think he's either 5 or 6. I can't exactly remember. But in any event, the last time the Spurs had the number one pick, they also went 22 consecutive years without missing the playoffs. Don't know if that's exactly going to happen this time around, but with that having been said, Coach Pop has seemed to have a knack for doing well with coaching big men, so I can definitely see him thriving in that environment for the San Antonio Spurs. And look, I don't know how long he's going to have left coaching San Antonio, but I think that should definitely leave an impact for that young kid. And I think it's definitely, and yeah, I think like you said, it's definitely better having him with the Spurs than say so many other organizations that have developed talent, but then somehow found a way to get rid of them. And funny you should say the Orlando Magic, because I'm pretty sure that they're the kings of developing talent and then getting rid of them after 4 or 5 years.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you some of the great content and stuff that you could check out with Paul on the 3&D, which is now going to be on the Empty the Bench podcast network, premiering next Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern. So, Paul, what do folks have to look forward to for you starting over here next week?
Well, first off, I want to thank you guys for bringing me on to the Empty the Bench network. Just trying to revive the 3&D, and now we're back. Got a lot planned. We got plenty of college basketball content. We're going to have plenty of NBA content, especially with the NBA draft coming up, the NBA finals coming up. We're going to try to get some good interviews and get some good insights on all that stuff. I'm, a diehard NBA fan, diehard college basketball fan, diehard NBA draft fan too. So, if you're looking for any content in the basketball world, it's going to be the place to come to, is the 3&D, for without a doubt. I'm looking forward to it. It's never an off season for basketball either. We always got the transfer portal. We got plenty of stuff going on, and then a few months away, we'll be back in the beginning of the season. So I'm looking forward to that. We're going to definitely have a lot of good things coming up, and definitely provide a lot of content here for ETB.
Awesome. Paul, I've watched your show before, and it's one of my favorites. I have to say that, and I'm really looking forward to it. You will be preceding us. You'll be on Mondays. We'll be on Tuesdays. And like you said, basketball, there really is no off season, because once you even get through the draft, and you have the summer league, and then before you know, you got preseason, and you may have a couple of weeks in the summer to just relax, but then you also got college hoops too, and there's so much. I'll tell you what, in college basketball next season, the big topic is going to be St. John's with Rick Pitino going over there. So you're gonna have a lot of stuff going on for sure, and we're definitely looking forward to it. Again, congratulations, welcome. We'll check out your show next Monday, and we'll definitely have you back again down the road. Paul, congratulations again, and we'll look forward to catching you next week.
Thank you, guys. Can't wait.
Awesome. Take care, Paul. Paul Lombardi, host of the 3&D, which will premiere here on the Empty the Bench podcast network next Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And, Hank, this. I mean, it's one of the best shows. I'm really looking forward to it. And, NBA's, there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, it's weird to think that we might actually have to wait a whole week for the finals to start. Almost like it's rendition of the Super Bowl in that regard.
Oh, how do you think I feel if, say, both conference finals in the NHL come to that same point?
Well, speaking of that, Hank, well, let's transition to that right now. Make a nice little transition here. And these conference finals, the Panthers and the Hurricanes, the Golden Knights and the Stars, as of this, they both went through 2 games. Kind of historic start to the conference finals, Hank, when you look at it, because this is the first time in Stanley Cup playoffs history that you've had 4 games, the first 4 games of a round before the Stanley Cup final all require overtime. You had the Panthers and Hurricanes requiring 4 overtimes and was like 17 seconds away from a fifth in game 1. And then the Panthers won that. They won game 2 to go up 2 games to an OT. The Golden Knights and Stars, almost the first 2 games were almost mirrored images of each other, where the Knights tied it up late and got it to overtime and won the games in OT really, really quick. So just absolutely fascinating. But just starting with this Panthers-Hurricanes series, again, something we've documented before on the show, the Panthers really, they're just the lower seeded number only. I mean, this was a team that, remember, won the President's Trophy just last season. They've got the veteran players. They've got 2 of the 3 Stahl brothers, ironically, all 3 of them playing in this series. But I'm really surprised what I'm seeing from Florida so far. Are you?
No, and listen, like I've said, I really think that the Panthers have been a team that, if you really saw after game 5 when Brad Marchand, isn't it crazy? Just think, if Brad Marchand had scored that breakaway goal, we wouldn't even be having this conversation about the Florida Panthers. But since then, the Panthers essentially took advantage of the Bruins' missed opportunity, and ever since winning game 5, they have only gotten stronger and stronger ever since then. And when you look at them, they are an extremely deep team featuring guys such as Alexander Barkov, Sam Bennett, and Aaron Ekblad, to name a few. And then you also have a few former Rangers in the Stahl brothers. And obviously Matt Tkachuk has been a big hero for the Florida Panthers. Remember, this was the guy that they acquired during the offseason to try to beef up that team and take them to the next level. And it's funny, it didn't look like that deal was going to work at first. I mean, it helped them to a certain degree, but losing Jonathan Huberdeau seemed to hurt them to a certain degree. And then there were also people questioning the move of getting rid of Andrew Brunette, despite the fact that he was the interim coach and he led them to the President's Trophy. But Paul Maurice, I think, has done a pretty solid job with this squad. And remember, this was the guy who ironically won the only cup for the Carolina Hurricanes in 2006. And yeah, they've had some clutch goals in the first 2 games. You had that quadruple overtime game that ended with Matt Tkachuk. And hey, he did it yet again in the second game. He scored another overtime goal. And I think another player that we need to talk about for the Florida Panthers is Sergei Bobrovsky. And remember, this is a guy that the Panthers invested a lot of money in when he became a free agent. And it's funny, I told you he was responsible for another crazy upset when he was with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And that was when they had that sweep of the Tampa Bay Lightning. But even for a guy who's getting paid a lot, he's been somebody that has shown up and come up big in the playoffs. 37 he has had 100 saves in the last 2 games and given up only 3 goals. That's how big he has been for the Florida Panthers thus far in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think while I did mention Matthew Tkachuk being a possible Conn Smythe candidate, should the Panthers finish the job and go all the way, I think you definitely have to make a case for Sergei Bobrovsky should they finish the job too. And again, this literally, I don't think I'm really making it a stretch when I say that this is probably the best team that the Panthers had in their franchise history. And yes, even better than the 96 team that had their own Cinderella run to the Cup Finals, the one that got swept by the Colorado Avalanche. But yeah, they're a great story. And look, I would not be the least bit surprised if they end up finishing the job and winning the Cup Finals. And look, there are two teams actually that the Panthers kind of remind me of. The first one would be the 2018 Capitals, in the sense that you thought that their window had shut down on them, but now it looks like this team might be just as good, if not maybe even better. And then I would also compare them to the 2012 Los Angeles Kings. Because if you remember, that team was an 8th seed, but then they pretty much ran roughshod over the entire Western Conference. And if I remember correctly, the LA Kings in the 2012 playoffs only lost one road game too. So I'm seeing a lot of similarities with these two squads here. And Johnny, if you may recall, the Florida Panthers, let's go over the other series they've won. 3 games on the road at at TD Garden in their comeback. They did not lose a single road game against the Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
And they've already won the first 2 games on the road. When teams are dominant on the road, that's pretty dangerous right there. And look, I'm not saying Carolina has no chance to come back, because look, they have a pretty strong team. They got back Teuvo Teravainen. However, when it comes down to it, even though I like a lot of their forwards, such as Sebastian Aho and Martin Necas, Stefan Nesson, the problem is their goal. When it comes down to the goalies, I'm taking Bob over Anderson in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and you saw them in Game 2 go to Ronta, which I don't think was really much of a surprise, considering.
Speaking of former Rangers,
pretty much played 2 games. Yeah, another one, right? Remember, we were talking about that before, but you were talking about the road teams, and the Panthers have been continuing a trend that we've seen a lot here in these Stanley Cup playoffs. So we've had 22 games in overtime go to overtime in these playoffs, and the road team has won 15 of those.
And let me reinforce what I said. They have not lost a road game since Game 1 against Boston.
Yeah, and we had documented after the first round how the road teams were so successful in the opening round. So it's been this entire postseason. It's like the road warriors. It's like home ice doesn't mean anything. Now, on the other side, though, in the West, it is a different story, because the Golden Knights have won both of their overtime games at home against the Dallas Stars. And I guess, it's a little bit of a different feeling, because, the old saying is you don't panic until you lose a game at home, whether it's home ice, home court, whatnot. So Dallas now goes back home down 2-0 versus the Hurricanes of their home games, and now have to go out down to Florida. But in this Western Conference, the Golden Knights are a fascinating team, because there isn't that one player that like lights up the scoreboard or the stat sheet, because what was it, like the player that had the most points, I think, had like 60 or 70 on them this year. So dominant point getter, but it's all spread out throughout. The goaltending's been really, really good. It's come up clutch. The scoring's been very, very clutch there in Vegas. And all of a sudden now they've got a pretty good advantage going to Dallas for the rest of for at least games 3 and 4.
Yeah, to answer your question, Jack Eichel has been the leading point getter for the Vegas Golden Knights, and he's just a shade over Chandler Stevenson. Eichel had 66, Stevenson had 65, and look, while his numbers may not look like the superstar numbers that like people may have expected, let's remember, he's now on a team that is much deeper than a lot of the horrible teams that he was playing with in Buffalo. And now he's joined by Stevenson, Marchessault, Riley Smith, and then you have another veteran like Alex Pietrangelo, who's won a cup with the St. Louis Blues, and William Karlsson, Mark Stone. This is a really deep squad that, quite frankly, I'm really shocked they haven't gotten as much recognition during the regular season. After all, they were first in the Pacific Division. They had 111 points, and right now, like, they're in great shape. Winning the first few games at home. Again, both of those games are kind of in mirror images. The only difference is we haven't had a quadruple overtime slogfest like the other series. But in this case, you had a late comeback by the Dallas Stars in Game 1 with Jamie Benn scoring with right around 2 minutes left to go. And then former Ranger Brett Howden, who, fun fact, Brett Howden has scored more goals already during this playoffs than a combination of Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad. And why am I even triggering myself with that?
Oh, hang.
Johnny, have I told you before that I may or may not be a borderline masochist?
Oh, well,
but no, in all seriousness, though, good comeback win for the Vegas Golden Knights. And do you want to know another stat about the Knights that has really been amazing? Look at how many goaltenders they've gone through over the course of the season. You know, they had Robin Lehner, but then Lehner ended up getting hurt, and they have had to go with guys such as Laurent Brossoit, Yuri Patera, Jonathan Quick they acquired at the deadline, but he didn't really get much action during the playoffs. And now they have Aiden Hill, and Aiden Hill has been an absolute wall lately. So, again, the fact that they've gone through all these goalies and are where they are right now, and possibly on the verge of winning their first ever Stanley Cup, that speaks volumes as to how good they are. Now, with that having been said, I wouldn't necessarily count out the Dallas Stars. And Johnny, I'm going to give you a little bit of a hot take here. I think I said I had the Dallas Stars winning the series in 7. Did I not?
I believe so, because I think I took Vegas. So
I think the Stars have a better shot at coming back from their 2-0 deficit than the Carolina Hurricanes. And the reason that I say that is because, well, not only do the Stars have a good amount of depth in Jamie Benn, Evgeny Dodonov, Miro Heiskanen, Rupe Hintz, and Joe Pavelski, to name a few, as well as Jason Robertson, who's been one of their best players all season, and not to mention Tyler Seguin, another veteran that's been around the block. But with that having been said, unlike Carolina, they have not lost a home game in this series. However, I'm also not as confident in them because I've seen Peter DeBoer teams make deep runs in years past, and while he usually does well and he'll turn teams around in that first year, he's another coach that reminds me of Gerard Gallant in the sense that his tactics he gets outcoached easily when it comes to the big games. And between him and Bruce Cassidy, who do you think I'm going to trust in a best of 7 series? Like, the Vegas Golden Knights are an obviously well-coached team right there. Like, again, how can you not be a well-coached team if you had to go through 5 different goalies?
You don't see that, if ever. See all that many goaltending switches for whatever reason, and be the successful.
You even remember seeing Robin Lehner play a game for the Vegas Golden Knights?
I mean, in passing, maybe really quick. Yeah, I see. It's so funny because I totally agree with you about because I was going to actually ask you this: which one of these 2 series do you think which team was down 2-0 has a better chance to come back and make it a series? And I agree with you. I think it is Dallas. I kind of think that first game in the East was so deflating to Carolina, and we saw that because they had to make a goaltending change, and Florida kept Bobrovsky, and Carolina went to Ranta. And I think that goes to show you that, when Carolina's trying to make some adjustments and stuff, but the Panthers are just like on such a roll right now. I just don't see it happening. Now, anything's possible. We've seen that before, but I agree with you. I think right now, the way we're looking at it, I think the Panthers are going to come out of the West. Come out of the East. The West, I think, is still wide open, though. I still wouldn't put it past the Stars to come back and make this a series. Remember, they were only 2 minutes away from tying that series in Game 2. If it wasn't for a late Golden Knights goal, which helped them to tie it up late in the third in Game 2, and then the overtime goal real quick. It's an entirely different series, 1-1 going back to Dallas for Game 3. But,
do you want to know a weird fact about the Dallas Stars, by the way?
What's that?
Many of their wins have been in games where they didn't score first. And they scored first both games in this series, and they lost.
That's fascinating. Yeah, sometimes scoring first doesn't really mean anything, though.
It does to a certain degree, but it doesn't. I'm
degree.
going to agree to disagree.
Yeah, it to a certain extent, yeah, absolutely. But so
the Golden Knights are a team. Like, let me put it this way: it really depends on the team. The Golden Knights are not a team you count out when they're down 1-0. But if you're talking about, like, say, I hate to take a shot on my own team again, but yes, I'm still salty. No, and yes, thank you for asking. But if you watch Game 7, like, I was there, I saw it with my own 2 eyes. Anybody who was watching that game, whether it be on TV or in the building, knew the Rangers weren't coming back. It really depends on how a team looks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And these playoffs have been just so crazy. Like I told you, we've had 22 overtime games, so many crazy things. And fun fact about the Golden Knights, they were 6-9 going into this postseason in overtime in the playoffs, and now they're 3-0 in this postseason in overtime. It's just absolutely wild, and these playoffs are only going to continue to get better and better as we take one step closer to the Stanley Cup Finals. Well, Hank, got to switch gears here onto a serious note here. Some sad news came down in the NFL land this past week as Hall of Famer Jim Brown passed away at the age of 87. And really, when you look at Jim Brown, I mean, he's a Hall of Famer with the Cleveland Browns. He's a movie star. He was a civil rights icon. Lived an extraordinary life, and I know you have plenty of things to say about this, so go for it.
So, a blog about Jim Brown will be posted after this episode. I've already been in the process, but I do have to warn you guys, if you are going to read this, it may be as long as, say, a Harry Potter novel by J.K. Rowling. But with that having been said, there's every reason for me to say this, because Johnny, I don't know if I've told you this, but I have a Mount Rushmore with regards to NFL greats. And on this Mount Rushmore, you have Lawrence Taylor, Tom Brady, Jerry Rice, and the fourth member of that Mount Rushmore is Jim Brown. Now, where he ranks among the other 3 names that I mentioned is a debate for another day. And quite frankly, it's not a debate I really want to have at the current moment, not so much because he died, but also because they all played different positions. However, if we're going to talk about NFL running backs, in my opinion, there really is not as much of a debate as people think. And make no mistake, Walter Payton was fantastic. So was Barry Sanders. And Emmitt Smith was pretty good too. But look, Jim Brown, he tops all of those guys. And let me explain why. Yes, he only played 9 seasons in the NFL. And yes, he retired before age 30. But let me give you the numbers. And I don't think the numbers even fully describe how amazing he was. Do you want to know his numbers for what his quote-unquote worst season was? 942 rushing yards. He still led the league. And this was his rookie season. And he almost led the Cleveland Browns to an NFL championship. And he won NFL MVP in the process too. And not to mention, this is the same Jim Brown who at Syracuse put up eye-popping numbers. And did you know that he averaged like 13 points on their basketball season? He didn't even play their senior year, but there was one game where he dropped 33 points and he didn't even start. And also, he's considered the greatest lacrosse player of all time, too. I don't know if everybody knew that, but he was a midfielder, and in 10 games during an undefeated season, his senior year, he scored 43 goals. They even had to change a rule because of the way he moved his stick. That's how good he was. And obviously, when we talk about his senior season in Syracuse, there have been a lot of Heisman Trophy snubs over the years. There's no question in my mind Jim Brown is easily the greatest player in college football history to not win a Heisman. I mean, he finished in 5th place in that voting. That was because of 2 reasons. Number one, Pell Horning was the winner, and no offense, because I know he was a member of your Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the reason he won that award was because their games were televised a lot, but also, let's not forget, Jim Brown was black. The other 4 players that were voted ahead of him were all white. And another interesting fact was the 2 players that were voted ahead of him in the Heisman Trophy poll in 56, they didn't even come within 100 points, 100 rushing yards of Jim Brown. And yet he finished 5th. And everyone on that poll agrees that Jim Brown was snubbed. That just goes to show you how bad the times were when Jim Brown was playing. But I would say his greatest accomplishment for Syracuse was encouraging Ernie Davis to go play there. And he was the guy who ended up becoming the first black player to win the Heisman, which, as I pretty much established, is what is an award that Jim Brown should have won for sure. But let me get back to his NFL career. The only other year in which he didn't rush for 1,000 yards, he still had 996 and 13 touchdowns. An average season with Jim Brown would have been around 1,200 rushing yards and like 12 touchdowns. Imagine if fantasy football had existed back in the 50s and 60s and you had Jim Brown on your team. You would have been dominating every single year because that's how good he was. But beyond just the numbers, this is a guy who was big, strong, and fast and almost impossible to tackle. And it's evidenced by the fact that he averaged 122 yards per game and 5.2 yards per carry. Those are records numbers that you will never, ever, ever see again. Not even Walter Payton did what Jim Brown did. And you may be asking, why did he retire so young? Well, a big reason for that was because, like I said, he was already at the top of his game. He was working on filming The Dirty Dozen. Art Modell wanted him to go to training camp for the Cleveland Browns, but Jim Brown said no. And Modell essentially threatened him by trying to fine him for every day he missed practice, saying it was unfair to the team. No, Art Modell. What was unfair is you trying to ruin Art, screw your team by punishing arguably the greatest player, not arguably the greatest player your franchise ever had. And obviously this is a historic tangent for another day, but there's a reason why. There's another reason why Art Modell is pretty much one of the most hated figures in the city of Cleveland. And that is pretty much one of them. Him pretty much kind of forcing Jim Brown to quit. And believe it or not, he never actually regretted that decision. And a big reason why is because he knew that he could still make a lot more money acting. Whereas if he'd kept on playing football, he probably could have risked a serious injury. So it definitely makes a lot of sense what he did. And he started a good amount of moves. And make a mistake, he wasn't quite as talented with regards to acting as he was on the gridiron, but he was still there were a lot of people, he still had a good following with regards to his Hollywood career. And I think what's also needs to be talked about is he was one of the first real athletes that spoke out against segregation, really had a voice during the civil rights movement. I would say him and Bill Russell are probably the top 2 in that department. And he actually was the leader in a gathering at the Cleveland Summit. And this was a group of athletes that were trying to rally around Muhammad Ali when he got his, when he had his boxing title stripped because of Vietnam. So when you look at it, Jim Brown has had a fascinating impact in both the world of sports and popular culture. He was larger than life and one of a kind. However, I do need to bring this up there because there is a bit of an elephant in the room regarding Jim Brown. He has also been arrested several times for domestic violence incidents, and he even was accused of rape in 1985. So I don't want to make it out there that Jim Brown was some sort of saint in what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, he is pretty much an example of what a flawed legend looks like, so to speak.
Yeah, I think you summed that up perfectly. I mean, I don't know what else I could really add. I mean, you were talking about Mount Rushmore. I would tell you right now, if I had put a Mount Rushmore of greatest all-around athletes, I think he'd be right up there.
Yeah,
I mean,
you don't get too many people who are considered the greatest in 2 different sports.
Well, think about in today's in today's world right now, in all the sports, do we have any multi-sport players, multi-sport athletes? I mean, the
No,
only guy, ironically enough, the only one that we could have possibly seen like that could have been Kyler Murray.
I
Because,
would probably say Deion Sanders.
well, I'm talking about, no, I'm talking about current. I'm not talking about in the
Oh,
past.
current. Sorry.
I'm talking like
Current.
as of right now. I mean, I was thinking Dion. I was thinking maybe like Bo Jackson back then. That would be back then. But like right now, there really isn't anybody that's a multi-sport athlete. So I would say right now you would have to put him in as the greatest all-around athlete. But yeah, like you said though, I mean the Hall of Fame resume. I mean the football stuff itself. 9-time Pro Bowler, 8-time All-Pro first team, 3-time MVP, 57 Rookie of the Year. Led the league in rushing yards 8 times. I mean, rushing touchdowns 5. I mean,
he was a Pro Bowler every single year.
What's that?
He was a Pro Bowler every year too.
Every year. Yep. You said 9-year career, 9-time Pro Bowler. He's 1960s NFL All-Decade, top 100 all-time team in the NFL. I mean, we could spend, hours upon hours just going through, his resume and his career. And yeah, you rarely will see him be like this. First of all, in the NFL today, you barely see a running back last 9 years, let alone put up those kind of numbers in for that long. So, yeah, and then all of his off the field stuff, and the civil rights movement and stuff. I mean, there really is not much more I need to add to that. But yeah, I mean, considering that we don't have multi-sport athletes today anymore. I mean, like you said, maybe Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson were the last ones of this. It was an incredible career. And yeah, like you said, also, the domestic violence stuff definitely has to be talked about too with him. But as an athlete, I mean, there really weren't many better than him, for sure. And he lived a full life. I mean, and then a football player making it to 87 years old. I mean, it's when we hear about all the stories about CTE and all these concussions and stuff in today's world. Now that's with quarterbacks and stuff, but running backs, we'll have to see. So yeah, it was an incredible career, that's for sure. He lived a full life, so that's really all you could really ask for. And obviously we will remember Jim Brown had a tremendous career there in the NFL and really in all the sports that he played. You don't see many like that even in today's world. We do not see that. So obviously a great career there for Jim Brown. Well, on a much lighter note, a couple of football stories that came out just actually right before we started to record here today. We do know now that Super Bowl 60 will be at Levi Stadium, home of the San Francisco 49ers. So they had Super Bowl 50, and now they will have Super Bowl 60 as well. So that is official. That is the case. So the Super Bowl 60 will be in San Francisco. So that is for sure. Now, a couple of rule things to discuss, and I know I didn't have this in the rundown, but this did come out. Also, one other thing too. It looks like Green Bay is going to host the 2025 NFL Draft. So we have that to look forward to in a couple of years there at Lambeau Field. I got to be honest with you, when it comes to the NFL Draft and stuff, I like the different locations. I really wish I miss it at Radio City though. I got to be honest with you, I loved it at Radio City in Manhattan.
It had such a pageantry feel to it back in those days too. Yeah, I agree.
So I've told you the story before. When I lived on Long Island, I would travel into the city and I would hang outside of Radio City and I would watch. Sometimes the cool part was actually just seeing all the limos and stuff, and all the athletes and the fans just hanging out outside of the building waiting to go in. Because the only other time you would really do that would be, I think the MTV Music Video Awards are there, but also the Tonys are right outside of there. So we would always go out and hang out and see if we could see anybody. And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, but it's also just the feel. When we watch on TV, like when we've had the two live streams that I've done here with ETB for, the NFL draft. I mean, you watch it on the TV and you see the 150,000 people or whoever, how many it is that's there. I mean, it's a very cool thing. So, but it will be in Green Bay. It looks like in 2025. Now, a couple of things here as well. So there were two things that the NFL owners approved of. Number one, they did approve a rule on Monday that will allow teams to designate an emergency quarterback on game days, which is a rule they revived after the 49ers ran out of quarterbacks during the loss in the NFC Championship game last season to the Eagles. So this rule applies only to quarterbacks who are on a team's 53-man roster. Practice squad players are not eligible to be emergency quarterbacks, not even if they are elevated for that week's game. Okay, I mean that's fine. Probably understandable, especially when we've seen, all the difference in quarterbacks that we've had here the last several years. I mean, when we did our football picks last year, some of those names that I was reading out, it was a tough read there. But so we've got that. And then also this one that dropped actually right before recording. So NFL owners are okaying the flexing of Thursday night games. So the NFL will have the capacity to flex a limited number of late season Thursday night football games on the Amazon Prime streaming platform. This was according to a resolution approved by NFL owners Monday in a close vote on the first day of their spring meeting. So it needed 24 owners to pass, and it did just that, 24-8. Now, a couple of interesting nuggets. When I read this article before we started here today, this rule will be in effect on a trial basis for the 2023 season only. If no Thursday night games carry over to 2024. The resolution would allow the league to flip a Sunday afternoon game into Thursday night and move the originally scheduled game to Sunday afternoon during weeks 13 through 17. The NFL must file a notice no later than 28 days before the game, which is an increase of nearly 2 from the earlier proposal. No team will be required to flex to a Thursday night game more than one time, and the maximum number of Thursday night games will remain 2 per team. So there's that. There was one other nugget here I want to see here because, we know the teams that voted against the resolution. So we know the Giants because John Mara has been outspoken about this. The Jets, the Packers, the Bears, the Raiders, the Lions, the Bengals, and the Steelers were the other ones. I'm not a fan of this because it is very difficult from the fans' perspective to flex a Sunday into Thursday game. And there's a reason why the Giants and the Jets were two of the teams that did not want to do this, because part of it is travel.
Stadium.
Right? I mean, first of all, Thursday night games at 8 o'clock. If you go from New York to New Jersey, you have to leave at 4? Just so you can get there at a decent time and be safe. I mean, you're basically committing an entire evening to this. And also, it's not that easy if, you maybe can't get out of work on a Friday or so. And from the players' side, too, it's an entirely different thing. Now, the 28-day advance notice is better than the 2 weeks that was originally being discussed when this first happened. But it barely passed, but it passed. But yeah, I'm not a big fan about the flexing about Sunday to Thursday. I think that's a bit of a reach.
I have a little bit of a hot take that I kind of discussed with you guys before the show.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just abolish the idea of Thursday night football? What's wrong with this, just having a lot of the games on Sunday and then the one on Monday? I don't mean to sound like an old school fan. I mean, look, I love NFL football as much as the next guy, but first I'm hearing let's make Black Friday games a tradition. Now we're just gonna let not only keep the Thursday night, which again, if it were just keeping Thursday night, that's one thing, but now you're trying to have flex. It's come on, stop with all these inconveniences. Roger, stop trying to think about your wallet and think more about player safety. Okay? Thank you.
Well, so that's true because
sorry, I wasn't expecting to give you a little Hank rant alert, but there you go.
I think though but that's well spoken and well taken, because you know what, you cannot be preaching safety and say you're safety first and then doing stuff that jeopardizes the safety. But you also said it too, Hank. Put that graphic there because it is all about one thing. Money. Money does have something to do with it. That's exactly right. It is all about the money. I think we're going to start setting that as a record for doing that. But you're starting to see this though now. It's also about wanting more because we have Thursday night football. We got Black Friday, which may become a yearly tradition, especially with the Jets. I mean, the Jets have already been on the record of saying they may want to play every year on that Black Friday game. So we've got Thursday night football. We've got Friday. We've got, when the college football season ends and you come down the stretch of the regular season, you have some Saturday games. You've got the regular Sunday. This year, you're going to have a couple of Monday games. There's actually going to be weeks where there's going to be 2 Monday night football games. That used to only be once a year. Now it's going to be multiple times in this upcoming season. But it's all about wanting more because really what the NFL also is too, Hank, it's like your 5-day work week, Thursday to Monday. First you have a game on Thursday, then you got your football Friday, then you got your Saturday to get ready for Sunday. You get the full slate Sunday, and you got Monday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday is your weekend. But really, when you do that, you have Tuesday as your recap day, and Wednesday is your transitional day. So really, it's about also you have these games that could stick out too. Now, do I like it? I don't, because I think you're right. I think the safety is a big deal here too.
This is gonna sound silly, but I'm kind of like trying to cook up in my mind a little parody of a certain Dolly Parton song. Working 9 to 5, 'cause it's all about the money. Working 9 to 5, taking hits, taking money. I don't know. It's so late.
I think that's got TikTok written all over right there.
Oh boy. I don't know. This is a horrible, ill-advised parody on my part, and I'm probably going to be getting embarrassed all across the internet for it, but it is true. You're turning NFL into a 9 to 5. I mean, can you imagine entering a 9 to 5 work environment where next thing you know, you could get your ACL snapped in half and your brain turns into mashed potatoes? I sure can. And I'm sorry if I got a little graphic for you guys, but that's kind of
the NFL though. But let's be fair though. The NFL has become a 365 a year operation though. I mean, it's very rare that we don't spend an episode talking about a football topic. When we used to always have a couple of weeks before, like that, we would, you could take a break from it, but that hasn't been the case this year. I mean, the Super Bowl was almost 4 months ago, and we have been between the schedule release, between the draft, between free agency, with the rule changes. I mean, Hank, it's crazy to say this, and I'm being serious. I'm not really rushing the time when I'm saying this. We're just a little over 2 months away from preseason football. The Jets and the Browns open up that Hall of Fame game in about a little less than 2.5 months away. It's wild though, right? I mean, doesn't it feel like we just had Super Bowl 57 just the other day, and now we're just a little over 2 months away from preseason football?
Johnny, do you know what football season does? It flies right by weeks 1 through, well, I'm sorry, I still have to get used to the fact that it's 18 because you added that extra game. Again, but we added that extra game in the season, but player safety matters though, right? And now once it's over, you have that big party known as the Super Bowl where let's hope you made all the right choices during said party. You're going through the offseason, all of a sudden it just sneaks right up on you.
Yeah.
That's the NFL. It's everywhere. Make a mistake. I love it. I'll watch NFL anytime, and I'll watch the G-Men religiously, but oh God. Roger knows best though, am I right?
That's absolutely right. He sure does. The best commissioner in sports. I'll still say that. But, and the crazy thing about you're talking about the schedule too. I just forgot a couple other things too. So this year you've got 3 games on Christmas Day, which is a Monday. Very, very unusual. Remember now, in the last couple of years, because of the expanded schedule, you also have a wild card game on a Monday. So we do. I mean, that's what it's like though now. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be more that happens. Now, I know we had COVID a few years ago. We did have a Tuesday and a Wednesday game, but that was because of COVID, so it's a little bit different. But
actually, I'll tell you a fun fact. That was the first time you ever legitimately did have a Sunday through Saturday week of football.
I remember that so well. That was some of the craziest times. The Tuesday.
That may have been
game.
the first time that you truly could have thought of football as the Dolly Parton operation.
Yeah. Well, I'm always used to watching, MAC football on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. That was always pretty cool during the college season. That would be cool to watch. But yeah, it's just going to be that kind of time. And before you know it, folks, it'll be here. But I don't want to rush the summer away because I know there are people that are yelling at their screen right now that are probably teachers and students that are probably going to yell at me. So I promise you, I will let you all enjoy your summer. I understand that. But that's what we got going on. Well, all right, we're going to try and get through these last couple of topics here really quick. So we'll do a little bit like a rapid one here. Like maybe I'm going to steal a phrase from our friends over there at Empty the Bench and do a little bit of a rapid rundown with some of these topics. But we had the Preakness Stakes this past week too. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because Mage, the winner of the Kentucky Derby, did not win it, finished third. Much different pace than it was last year. But a big deal about this, National Treasure did win the 148th Preakness for trainer Bob Baffert, who was back after his suspension. This was the 8th Preakness win for Baffert, which is the most ever by a trainer. And of course, Baffert's been in the news a lot here these last couple of years because of the suspensions that he's been handed down from Churchill Downs, from the Preakness, from the New York Racing Association. But he was back there at Pimlico this past weekend. Now, this was kind of an emotional day for Baffert because the win for him in the Preakness, but prior to that, earlier in the undercard, one of his horses had to get euthanized because he got injured and threw the rider off. So it was very a mixed emotion kind of day there for Baffert, but he's able to get his 8th win. And of course, controversy because of the suspensions that he's had to deal with here these last 2 years or so. But you did have Mage, the Kentucky Derby winner, finish third. So there will be no Triple Crown this year. So when we have the Belmont Stakes in 3 weeks, unfortunately, there will be no Triple Crown. Usually that's the one day per year that my hometown, where I spent the first 25 years of my life, gets put on the map. It still will, but it just won't have as much meaning as it would if we did have a potential Triple Crown. And unfortunately, Hank, this is a story that Nick and I were talking about 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, horse racing, which has been dealing with a lot here between, death and a lot of other storylines. Another horse died at Churchill Downs recently. So this is now the 9th fatality at the track since April 27th. Now, you weren't here 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the 7 horses that had died around the Kentucky Derby. They're going to have to investigate this because now this is really going to the extreme here. I still believe there's some sort of track condition that's happening there to have this happen like this for this long.
I'm sorry, you said it's a track condition. Could doping also be a possibility? Because I remember in years past that's been a thing with horses and doping and whatnot, and there have been a lot of scandals.
Well, that's part of that's actually another thing that the sport of horse racing is dealing with is all the doping stuff. Absolutely. The whatever it's doping or they putting stuff in the hay or whatever it is. Yeah. I don't know if that's necessarily the reason for the fatalities that are happening. The only reason why I'm bringing up the track condition was there was a situation that happened at Santa Anita out in California a few years back where you had a bunch of horses dying on the track, and they actually did, if I remember correctly, shut the track down for a few weeks and got it fixed, and now you don't hear about that happening. Now, the counter to all this also is they are telling you that that deaths in horse racing are actually at its lowest point, but when you have this many happen for this long and around a major event like the Kentucky Derby is, I mean, it is a major event. It's one of the biggest days in the horse racing calendar. It's a very big deal. Now, I truly think, and again, I'm just going off of prior experience with this. I do think that there's some sort of track condition happening there at Churchill Downs, because to have that many happen around the Derby and this continuing to be a problem leads me to believe that. Now, you could also be right though too. There could be, drugs or, doping involved in all this too. That's certainly a possibility. But again, for a sport that's been dealing with doping and unfortunately, deaths, it's just not a good look, especially when, this has now happened at 2 major events this year at, Churchill Downs with the Derby, and also the situation that happened with Baffert at the Preakness. It's not good.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is a story that's whether it be like the track stuff or whether it be my own suspicion that I just told you about. I have a feeling this story is probably going to grow legs within the next few months.
Yeah, there's let's be honest. This will not be the last time you hear about something like this. There'll be more to it. But I mean, I would truly think if this continues to happen at Churchill Downs, they need to shut it down indefinitely and figure out what's going on there. That's what I would do. I mean, nine in a month is 1 in a month is too much. 9 in a month is just, you can't even put into words how awful it is, because they are equine athletes, and it's not a good look. It really is not.
Yeah, no, that's pretty bad.
Well, we'll keep you updated here for sure if there's any new developments in this story. And finally, to close out the show here today, we got to talk about the PGA Championship that's happened this past weekend in Rochester, because 2 unbelievable things. For number one, Brooks Koepka won his 3rd PGA Championship in the last 6 years, which I think only Jack Nicklaus has done. But the reason why this is a big deal, Hank, Brooks Koepka is on the LIV Tour. So a LIV Tour golf member won a major for the first time. Now, this feels to be a little bit different, because if you saw afterwards, you did have I forget who it was. There was one PGA Tour golfer that did go up. It was very, very friendly with Koepka, and they were hugging it out. So maybe in some ways this might actually be a good thing. They may be able to sort this out, because I think at the end of the day, I don't know. I know the LIV Golf Tour has a ton of money, but I don't know if they're really going to be able to survive. And the interesting thing about this too would be if Koepka gets enough points to possibly be in the Ryder Cup, which is, the Ryder Cup is the big thing, the big USA thing at the end of the year. Would they take a LIV Golf member on the Ryder Cup?
I mean, that's a really good question, and I feel like that's going to be a controversy that's really going to get them thinking, and who knows. I'm of the belief that controversies can be a good thing, so to speak, in this situation. But yeah, I think definitely Brooks Koepka's, what's his name? Koepka. Did I get it right?
Yeah, you got it. Brooks Koepka. Yep.
I'm sorry. His last name sounds like our offensive coordinator, but you know who I'm talking about.
Koepka, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think his win definitely raises some eyebrows, and he's one of the better golfers in the PGA Tour too. No.
Yes.
He
plays for LIV Golf though.
Didn't he win the Masters too this past year?
No, he didn't win the Masters, but I mean, he's won multiple majors though before. Like I said, this is the 3rd time he's won the PGA Championship in 6 years. But because you've got LIV players that are eligible for the Ryder Cup, and he's got a good number of points now from winning this. If he continues on this trajectory, he's going to be eligible for the Ryder Cup, and that's what's going to cause a lot of craziness. Is would they actually take a player from LIV Golf on that Ryder Cup?
Yeah,
it might be causing a lot of stuff that might be like, this might be the worst nightmare that the PGA's had to deal with if that is indeed the case, because the whole controversy behind LIV Golf. But that's something to watch here too. And I don't know if you'd watched the final round on Sunday, but Michael Block, who really took the whole weekend by storm for what he did, able to get a hole-in-one on Sunday, and what he had to do was he had to finish in the top 15 to be eligible to possibly play again in the PGA Championship in the future, and also be eligible for the following week. Well, he got it. Well, there was also some great, videos on social media about getting phone calls and stuff about him being eligible going forward, and this might be good for golf too, because you can get more of these like kind of amateur like players to keep going here. But really, just a crazy, an amazing weekend for golf. And now what we've got here, Hank, is a very interesting development with Koepka winning, with a LIV Golf player winning a PGA event. Now this is kind of where the PGA did not want to be, and now they're going to have to see what happens here coming down the stretch.
What's that term we used? It's opened up a can of worms.
Open up a can of worms. Sure has.
Is that a good phrase to use?
Yep. And it's gonna cause a lot of interesting things here later on in the year, especially if this does continue to happen. But we will find out. But that is going to put a wrap on episode 55 of the show. Another great show. So of course, folks, make sure to follow us across all of our social media platforms on Facebook and Twitter at GameOnETB. We're on Instagram at GameOn_ETB. Also ETB Network as well. You can also check us out on youtube.com/ETB Network, where if you like today's episode, hit that subscribe button, and of course, have your notifications set so you never miss an episode of Game On, of Fruity Cereal, of Empty the Bench, and of course, our new show coming up here, the 3&D. And again, we want to thank Paul Lombardi for jumping aboard today. If you missed that, go check it out either earlier in the episode, or we'll also have another video about that on our YouTube channel as well. And of course, check us out at etbpodcast.com for great blogs from Hank. He's got a great one about the late, great Jim Brown coming up, Jennifer Cade as well. And also check us out on any of your favorite podcast platforms, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, all that good stuff. So if you want the audio version of the show, you can catch it out there. So again, I want to thank Paul Lombardi for jumping aboard. Of course, check him out on the 3&D, premiering next Monday, May 29th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Hank, good to see you. Enjoy the rest of your week.
You do the same, Johnny.
Absolutely, folks. So for Hank Indictor, I'm Johnny Montalbano. Everybody enjoy the rest of your week, and we will catch you again next week.